On your Monday episode of Locked On Raptors, once again, your Toronto Raptors fall to the Milwaukee Bucks, who just simply own them. Scottie Barnes was not very good, but it's all okay because we're also taking a look ahead to the 2025 NBA Draft.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday, January the 20th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I'm covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can also find the show on Instagram, and you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server, the Sicko Den, as they call it. The link in the description of the podcast. You can come join the sickos in there, talk about the podcast every day, talk to people just like you who don't want to work during the day and would instead rather talk about the roster in 3 years' time. It's a great thing. Come hang out. It's lovely. Great little listener family we got going over there. You can also go and support the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter by going to the QR code on the screen or to the link in the description of the podcast, whether you're watching or listening. It's much appreciated when you support. Again, it's 100% free. It costs $0. And you get me 5 days a week talking about your Toronto Raptors in written form on top of the podcast. You also get Katie Heindel 4 days a week talking national stories, Michael Shearer once a week with his basketball poetry take on the league, and you get Josh Lloyd fantasy tips as well. It's all in there. Please go check it out. It's much appreciated. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Now's the perfect time to join. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDINNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. And we get rolling here on your Monday edition of the show talking about a Toronto Raptors 130-112 loss to the Milwaukee Bucks. Started off poorly. They never really got it back after that. And look, this is a game that I got to say, I did not watch in real time. I was in the woods at a cabin with some friends over the weekend, and I just got the all possessions viewing in on Monday morning. Thank you, League Pass, for offering the all possessions stream of games. So instead of 2.5 hours of bad Raptors basketball, I only had to watch 45 minutes of it today. That was a lifesaver. And so we'll dig into the game. But look, there's not a whole lot to learn about the Raptors when they're playing without Immanuel Quickley. We've seen this version of the team a whole bunch. They're not very good. They're capable of nice things. Like, of course, they won a couple games last week. But for the most part, without Quickley, we kind of know the beats and rhythms of this team. And we're just kind of waiting for IQ to come back so we can see the most important players on this team play with one another and see if they can improve upon the not so good early returns we've gotten of the fully healthy version of the team. Kind of just in a waiting mode at this point. And so we're not going to go full-fledged 3 full segments on this game. I like you guys more than that. And so in segment 2, we're going to talk about the draft a little bit, which will be fun. We're going to take a look at my early top 5 for the Raptors at whatever pick they get, hopefully in the top 5. If not, boy, oh boy, what a waste this has been. Either way, we got the good, the bad, and the coming up later too. But let's get into the big crux of the game against the Bucks, which I think is just talking about Scottie Barnes, I guess. He was not particularly good in this game, and the Raptors themselves overall, I mean, if Scottie Barnes doesn't have it, if he's not bringing it offensively in particular, then the Raptors are always going to be in tough. Sometimes they get otherworldly performances from other guys to fill in the gaps, and I don't think Scottie Barnes' game was 100% bad or anything like that. There was a lot of good stuff with the playmaking, with the defense in his game, as is usually the case. He brings some things to the table even when he doesn't have it, but going 4 of 16 is pretty tough. And so we'll get into that. And look, I just think, look, when I watched this game back, I expected it to be kind of like a cringe fest of watching Scottie Barnes play. I don't think it was quite to that degree. It wasn't great, though. 10 points, 4 of 16 shooting, 0 of 6 from downtown. Those damn threes, I tell you, they're not falling. And I guess this is kind of the big thing we can talk about. He is well below 30% from 3 this season. I still think the catch and shoot stuff in rhythm looks fine and is something that needs to be part of his diet, just as like a function, sort of like a perfunctory part of his game going forward. Just, all right, if he's going to take 3 or 4 catch and shoots a game, that's good, that's healthy, that's viable. That's something you can live with even if they're not falling in, because the lion's share of his offense is coming from elsewhere on the floor. In this game, it was too big a component of what he was doing. And This is the Immanuel Quickley effect. We've seen it all season long. Scottie Barnes takes more threes when Quickley's not playing. He takes fewer threes when he is. And until Quickley's back, until the Raptors have other guys who can carry the day volume-wise, if and when Quickley's not available, you're going to see Scottie Barnes revert to jacking threes just as sort of a matter of course within the offense, which is just not operating the way it should when IQ is not there. You have Davion Mitchell as the lead guard in this situation, and he's just not a guy who's going to get threes up with reckless abandon. RJ Barrett, credit to him. He was 3-7 in this game, a nice bounce back after a really rough month or so of shooting 26, 27% from deep. That's been tough to watch. And it's really important that they'll start to go for him. But when you're playing a lineup with both Davion Mitchell and Jakob Poeltl, Scottie Barnes is just going to have to shoot. And I know people don't like it, but it's just kind of the way the team ends up having to play. And Scottie's in positions that aren't the best for him. And so he's getting them up. They're clearly not working. And I think, my sort of stance on his shooting this season, while wins are very clearly not the priority, has been to sort of let him empty the clip, see what he's got, see what if the pull-up juice can come around, see if the catch and shoot stuff can get back to where it's been. I think we're probably at the point now where at best he's going to be an okay catch and shoot guy. And the pull-up stuff just kind of needs to be fully eradicated from his game going into next year. And that's fine. I think a really good version of Scottie Barnes can be there, even if the pull-up three is not there. It probably means that he's not ever going to be the sort of lead creative offensive engine that I think a lot of people hoped for. And that's a bummer, but I also don't think that needs to be a death knell to the idea that he can be one of the best players, second best player, whatever, on a very good playoff team. I still think that's there for him in the right context with the right teammates, with the right setup around him. It's just going to require a little bit more because he's not your Giannis. He is not your Jokic. He is not your Luka Doncic. He's not even your Jason Tatum. And it's just not going to get there. And that's fine. Like, that's not that big a deal. He's still going to be worth the max deal he's on, especially the 25% max that he's almost certainly going to be earning next year, because I really don't think he's making all NBA at this point. If he's even eligible, I think he's like 2 games shy of maybe the 65 game cutoff already. If he plays every single game from here to the end of the year, we'll see about that. Don't think he's making all NBA anyway. So he's going to be on the 25% max. And the player he is, with all the impact he brings, the fact that even on off nights, he can walk nearly into triple doubles, like that's going to be a fine, totally reasonable contract to have on the books. You're not going to be too sweaty about that. And I do think we'll get into the draft. Like, there are a couple guys who could really make the whole Scottie Barnes thing make a lot more sense if the Raptors were able to go and get those guys in the draft. We'll talk about them coming up. But back to this one. Yeah, it wasn't the sharpest of games, right? And I think a lot of the stuff that wasn't working too is stuff that has been working a lot of late. The mid-range, he just wasn't super sharp from mid-range in this one. There were little moments of stuff that did work, right? I thought there were some moments where he was running pick and roll with RJ Barrett, with Kelly Olynyk on the floor because Jakob Poeltl was in foul trouble. And there was kind of the requisite space there to kind of give Scottie the free run of the middle of the floor. And I thought as a dive man, that kind of worked. That's something I want to see them tap more into going forward here. And we'll get into the Jakob Poeltl question a little bit when I talk about some of the prospects and their fits with the Raptors. But if Scottie's not going to be able to shoot threes, that directly impacts the fit of Jakob Poeltl with him and the sort of long-term vision, which I've always maintained. He's not the center of this team when they're excellent again, but he can be the center of them, as they continue to get good. But you're going to need a better glove-like fit there long-term, I think, if it's really all going to work with Scottie Barnes as your 4. And it's just, you see little moments here where the space around him can work and he can find those little pockets. But if the spacing's not great, or the threes are going up at a too high a clip, or, the stuff that usually works for him from the mid-range is just not falling, the offensive juice just kind of falls off there. And as much as the 10 assists are nice, and there were some really nice dimes in this one, he had just 3 turnovers, was not a bad playmaking game by any means for Scottie Barnes. He wasn't out there driving, winning, positive basketball because the offense just wasn't good enough. And that's, a bit of a disappointment, come down after the 2 games he played last week, where I thought against Golden State and even more so against Boston, he was really impactful. He was really driving, winning minutes out there. And, confronted with a guy as good as Giannis, who is just an absolute monster and also tasked with guarding Giannis a whole bunch. It was just a really difficult time for Scottie in this one. And it's, it kind of gives you the look of where he is versus where the guys who really kind of drive the league are. And Giannis is one of those guys. Scottie Barnes is just not right now. Doesn't have to be a bad thing in the grand scheme, but it's just the reality the Raptors have to operate within right now. and adapt and build the team according to what Scottie Barnes' needs demand. Yeah, I think overall, like, the second half was saved a little bit in this one. I thought they were fine. I thought Scottie had some nice moments. He kind of found the touch again. That was nice. I think he was a 3 of 5 in the second half. That's nice. You'll take it. Whatever. Like, I don't know, man. What do you want from me? The Raptors keep on losing basketball games, and at some point, we run out of things to learn, and we're just kind of reinforcing things we kind of already seem to have a pretty good inkling of. And that felt very much like what this game was. The Raptors up against a team that we know owns them, that very much, we'll get to this later, is just like a really bad matchup for them. A team that without Immanuel Quickley and just with the current talent it has, even with Quickley, it's just, there's got to be an infusion somewhere to kind of bring this thing forward. And luckily, they're on track to have a real high pick because they're 10-32. So we're going to come back on the other side and get into some draft stuff, as I've been kind of teasing getting into draft stuff a little earlier than I usually do. And I think for my sanity, after watching that game this morning, I decided now is the time. There will be time where we can do full episodes about full games and really dive into the nitty gritty once the team gets back to playing more interesting ball, once hopefully Quickley returns from the lineup in some reasonable amount of time. But until then, I got to have one eye on the future. And so we'll come back on the other side and I will deliver to you my debut top 5 big board for the Toronto Raptors with their pick in this upcoming NBA draft. We'll talk about Cooper Flagg, of course, who rules, and a bunch of other guys in an order that I know, but you don't know yet. We'll tell you what that is coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Basketball season's heating up, and there's no better way to get real money action while you're watching your favorite NBA stars than with Prize Picks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just love some friendly competition with pals, Prize Picks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's right. Think LeBron's going to drop 30 points, or maybe Luka's getting more than 8 assists. Prize Picks lets you make your predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. I have been a big fan of Prize Picks. It's super fun. I like the very easy, simple sort of layout and user interface. It's very, very intuitive. And if you're not even a huge fan of basketball or daily fantasy sports, it's very accessible if you want to go play around. You get Jason Tatum, you can pick him for more than 29 points in a given game. Or maybe you're watching the Raptors, you want to pick Chris Boucher to get more than whatever his projected number of points is, because if he's going over, he's probably going over by a lot. You can go and play all of that over at Prize Picks. Now's the perfect time to join. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDINNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win. To get the bonus, it's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Back at it here on your Monday edition of Locked On Raptors as we turn our eye draftward as we look towards late June, where hopefully the Toronto Raptors will be adding some infusion of talent to this roster that needs it. Whether it's a guy who becomes the sort of go-to, this is the guy that it's all kind of hovering around now, he's the number one. Everyone else locks into their places a little more sort of cleanly on the hierarchy, and they go off and they're off and running. That's option one. That would be great. But I also think that there's a chance here that they get a guy who kind of fills in the gaps of this roster a little bit more effectively and at least gives a shot to Scottie Barnes and Immanuel Quickley in particular as the sort of 2 leading engines of this team. Maybe not in a way that makes them like super duper playoff viable just yet, but makes the whole team make sense, fills in some of the weaknesses, and just gives them a deeper, more fleshed out roster to at least give the main guys they've invested in a better chance of finding success. These are the 2 hopeful outcomes for the draft, one being a little bit more hopeful or preferred than the other if they're able to achieve it. And so I have gone about and made myself sort of an initial top 5 big board for the Raptors going into this offseason and the draft. And look, I've said it before. I'll lay out the caveat again. I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool draft expert by any means. I am not watching hours and hours of college basketball. I'm reading a lot. I'm listening to stuff. I'm watching what I can in sort of bits and pieces of games or scouting videos, stuff like that, and really leaning on the opinions of draft experts I trust, all to kind of go into my brain, and then I sort of pull out my own little takes and synthesize it all and try to have at least an educated look, but sort of with my own, I try to, infuse my own opinions and stuff like that into it as well, without it being total groupthink and all that stuff. It's tough. There's a lot of good people covering the draft out there. It's hard to not sort of co-opt opinions and agree with people on things and all of that. But yeah, we do our best here. And so as a non sort of dyed in the wool draft head, I am going to do my darn best to, be as educated on it as possible and offer my sort of clear-eyed takes on stuff from where I sit. So I don't know if you needed that caveat. It's pretty established at this point if you listen to this show, but there we go. So my top 5 for the draft. Basically, here's how I kind of approach this stuff. There's like the obvious top guys where it's like, yeah, they're 1 and 2. They're the best guys, and they could be offensive creators who drive good offense. Like, I think the number one thing, if you can find it in the draft, an offensive engine who you can, have be the best player on an offense that can kind of flirt with or be top 10 is kind of the dream in the draft. And it's the hardest thing to find. There aren't that many of those guys. And I think the bar for what that is getting higher and higher as the league gets more talented. So you might be a little surprised at a couple of the guys that have a little lower, guys that have higher, just because I think the bar to be one of the engines in the NBA is so sky high that if you don't quite have the juice to be that, then you kind of end up in sort of the Scottie Barnes, Immanuel Quickley bucket we're dealing with right now, which is like good players. I mean, Quickley is a little bit more of an unknown still, but Scottie Barnes, very good player, probably never going to be at this point the engine of a very good offense. I still think with the right pieces around him, Scottie plus shooting and play finishing can be the recipe for a very good offense, but like it's got to be a very specific, tailored supporting cast with a lot of talent and depth. Whereas if you get yourself like a true offensive engine, they can make something out of whatever. They can make lemons or make lemonade out of lemons or make lemonade out of oranges or whatever it is. They're really good at making lemonade, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Scottie Barnes not a lemonade man right now, but a couple guys in this draft I think could be. Beyond that, I do start to look at fit probably a little higher in the draft than some people do. I know there's the whole best player available thing. You got to take the best player available. I think that's a wildly subjective thing that really means different things to different people. So I don't love to throw that out there as like any sort of, leaned on slogan when I'm talking about the draft. I like to try to, bake in fit like pretty high into my calculus because I do think fit matters a lot in basketball. It's like pretty clear. If a guy gets drafted to a team where the fit's off, that guy's development is going to be hindered, and he's got a lesser chance of reaching his higher end outcomes than if he's put onto a team where the fit is conducive to proper development and getting to this guy to where he might need to go. And so I do think fit matters more than we give it credit for. And I think with just how talented a lot of guys are, a lot of prospects are, it really is, unless you're one of those very few guys at the top of the draft that are no-brainers, sort of a cut above the rest, I do think fit matters quite a bit as to what the development track is going to look for a lot of these guys. And so with that, let's give you my top 5 Sean's draft guys to start. Very much subject to change. We'll, blow this out beyond 5 for sure, because, the Raptors are not guaranteed to be picking the top 5. It would really suck if they weren't, but that's the reality we live in the flat and lottery world. And so here's what we got for my top 5 as we take a brief pause from talking about the game against the Bucks to think about better days ahead. Here's what I got. Number 1, Cooper Flagg from Duke. It's obvious. He's incredible. He is the best player in this draft. He's putting up absurd numbers. His box score metrics, his advanced metrics, his box score stats, all ridiculous. He's so good. And if he was drafted by the Raptors, man, oh man, does this whole thing to start to make a lot of sense really quickly. Number 2, we got Dylan Harper, who from Rutgers, the guard. He's putting up 25 and 4 on 59.5% true shooting, 35% from deep. I think, he's maybe not like the super duper no doubt prospect that Cooper Flagg kind of feels like he is. There's some ways in which this doesn't go well, but I think he's got a pretty good pathway to being a very, very good lead guard who can guide good offense. At 6'6", it's pretty helpful too. I think him and Quickley as a duo could be really nice. And then, hopefully you can find some sort of defensive help on the wings to fill in the gaps. But I think a Harper Quickley backcourt would be tons of fun and would really help accentuate Scottie as the power wing that I think he is. Number 3, I've got Ace Bailey. He's a very controversial guy. We'll get into him a little bit more. We'll talk about all these 3, 4, 5 guys a little bit more in a sec here. But Ace Bailey, I've got at 3. 4 out of Rutgers. Number 4, I've got Newell. Maybe this might not be seeing him as high on most boards as I think I have him. He's one of those I'm pitching my flag and I'm planting my flag on this guy type of prospects. Talk about him more in a sec here too. And then Kasparas Jakucionus, the guard from Illinois, who's very cool. I'm a little concerned about the athleticism, but there's a lot of fun stuff going on with Yak 2.0 that I'm a pretty big fan of. So we'll get into those three guys coming up here a little more depth. But yeah, Bailey, Newell, Jakucionus round me out 3, 4, 5. Let's go to Bailey for a sec. I know Ace Bailey's going to be like this super polarizing player, right? And there's a lot of stuff like in just like his raw statistical profile and just sort of his style of play that aren't typical things that I like. I am not a super huge fan of guys who don't have a lot of passing feel. Typically, like I like guys to be able to create for others. I am a big proponent of good assist to turnover ratios and stuff like that. Ace Bailey's averaging 1 assist to 2.1 turnovers a game right now for Rutgers. It's not great. That's sort of the big hang up. The other thing is like the shot selection is truly bonkers, but he can also make a lot of his shots, and that's kind of what throws you for a loop. He's not someone who gets to the rim a ton. He doesn't have great burst to get around guys, at least not yet. All of these caveats, he's 19 years old. These guys figure things out. It's a little bit different. You get to the NBA spacing as opposed to college spacing. That changes the dynamic a lot here. There's a lot of unknowns just based on the context in which these guys play. But Ace Bailey, 19 points a game, 8 boards, 1 assist. He's got 1.4 blocks and 1.1 steals. That is what really, I think, interests me in Ace Bailey, because I think the shot making is pretty real. He's shooting 37% from deep on 5 attempts a game. I think he's going to be a good 3-point shooter. And I really buy the defense with him. He's 6'10". He's long. He's athletic. And I think he's athletic in sort of an inverse way to RJ Barrett almost, where RJ Barrett's athleticism is like straight downhill and he just kind of is strong and barrels through guys, but moving side to side, I don't quite see it. It's kind of different with Bailey. He doesn't quite have that straight downhill momentum he can get to, but I think moving side to side and just using his length and his sort of balance and tools to slide with offensive players and just be large, work and help, stuff like that. I don't know, man. I kind of buy it. And if you're a 6'10", ridiculous shot making guy who can shoot high 30s from 3 on high volume and also put up, a lot of defensive metrics and be a long wing stopping type of guy, that's a very valuable basketball player. And I think, maybe the view of Ace Bailey from a lot of folks is he's this hooper. He's just the guy who's going to go get buckets. And he might be able to do that, right? If he ever figures out how to sort of, the passing stuff to kind of, ease the burden of him as a shot maker. And if he can ever find a way to kind of get a little deeper into the teeth of the defense and score at the rim, there's a real high-end scorer potential right here with Ace Bailey. But I think at the very least, he's like the thing I've kind of thrown around is like, what if like Michael Porter Jr. had lateral quickness is kind of the idea. And like, that's an incredibly valuable player. And I think at the 3rd overall pick, if you're not getting a clear offensive engine type, getting a guy who's just going to be a no doubt very good basketball player is a really good way to go about using your pick. And so I'm pretty in on Ace Bailey at 3 right now. Again, subject to change over time, but I think the defensive stuff for him is what really makes him an interesting prospect to me. Ace Newell, I think he's maybe, again, the surprise that I have him at number 4. I think he's just another one of these guys who has like a pretty high floor and a really interesting upside if everything hits. It's like a combination of fit and high floor, plus also the sort of dream on factor that you hope to get at the high end of the draft. And I think Newell, like, he's, to me, baseline, he's like a really good defensive vertical dive man big who, the kind of, I threw around this name in the Locked On Raptors newsletter today where I go in more depth on this, but I had like Derek Lively the second as sort of like the low end floor for Ace Newell, where it's just like, yeah, he's a guy who fits on most teams. Everyone needs that kind of big man. He is at first your platoon partner for Jakob Poeltl to give you 48 minutes of solid center play, and eventually he probably becomes the successor. And the difference between him and Jakob Poeltl is I do think there's some shooting upside there with Ace Newell. He's shooting about 32% on a couple attempts a game so far with Georgia. It's nothing crazy. He's at 71% at the line. Like, it's not like a guarantee, but I think he's skilled enough. And I think the shot, to me, from, a pretty uneducated shot doctor eye, but I like to think I know what a good jumper looks like. I think it looks workable. And if you can turn a vertical dive and defense big man into a guy who does all that stuff, but also stretches the floor, that's one of the most valuable archetypes of basketball player in the world right now. And it's a very hard type of guy to find. And so that's why I'm kind of into Newell. Again, I could fall off. This could be an early season sort of infatuation with a guy that I maybe fall off of later, but I think he's a really interesting player and I think would fit what the Raptors are doing really, really nicely and have some upside to tap into even if even if the floor is sort of maybe not super thrilling. When it comes to Kasparas Jakucionus, number 5, I think a lot of people probably have a number 3, maybe even number 2 in a couple of cases. And look, the numbers are awesome. He's crazy efficient. He's got like 66% true shooting in Illinois this year, and he does a whole lot of fun stuff. He's a pull-up three-point shooting wizard. He is shooting like 40% on all threes this year. He has this like really beautiful sort of feel for the game and this sort of herky-jerky rhythm that keeps defenses off balance. He's got tons of craft when he gets into the deep parts of the defense to kind of, keep guys off balance with head fakes and pass fakes and bobs and things like that. I worry a little about the athleticism, and that is why I have him number 5 here as opposed to in the top 3. I think he's got a lesser chance than Harper or Flagg of being like a no doubt, this guy is your offensive engine type player. And if that's the case, like I said before, I think he falls into a similar bucket as some of the other guys that you're working with on this team. There's, the Scottie Barnes, Immanuel Quickley of it all. If all of those guys are like just below the tier of guys who can be lead offensive creators, you probably still have a pretty good offense because that's a lot of offensive talent working with one another, and it's very complementary. But I do think the athleticism stuff kind of keeps Jakucionis out of the top upper reaches of, he's not going to be, if you're thinking of like lead big creating guard types, right? He's not going to be your James Harden. He's not going to be your Luka Doncic. I think he's probably a little tier below that because of the athleticism stuff. And again, totally could be wrong, perfectly open to being wrong. And I'd love to be wrong about all the stuff that I'm saying that's negative in any way here about these teenagers, but that's just my early read on Jakucionis. Again, this is going to evolve over time, but I did think it was a good call on a Monday after a bad loss, a couple days removed from a bad loss, to just take a second to think about the draft a little because it gives you some hope for what could lie ahead. We'll come back on the other side, close things out with the good, the bad, and the from the game against the Milwaukee Bucks. Kelly Olynyk looking viable again. We'll talk about that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, and right now, from first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. New customers right now can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is super easy to navigate and has a variety of bets to keep every single game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. We know that it's going to be Washington and Philly, and Kansas City and Buffalo in the championship games in the NFL playoffs. Maybe you are a Bills fan and you really want them to beat the damn Chiefs finally, but you're just not so sure if they're going to do it. Put some money on the Chiefs to win, so that if they win and you're a Bills fan, at least you get some money out of the deal and you're not feeling so sad. That's the happiness hedge, baby. This is how you make it work as a sports fan who is primed to expect disappointment. I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. I know all about this. Either way, just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Back at it here on your Monday edition of Locked On Raptors. Bit all over as we try to dodge talking too much about that game against the Milwaukee Bucks because it stunk. And so we come back after a little brief dalliance with draft stuff and get to the good, the bad, and the way we wrap up every single episode of this here podcast after the Toronto Raptors play a basketball game with a thing I liked, a thing I didn't like, and a thing that's got me a little bit intrigued from said basketball game. The good, Kelly Olynyk. He's kind of looking like himself of late. He looks a little bit less like a mid-30s man debilitated by back pain. He's moving, and that's nice. It's not like the Raptors are winning games or anything like that, but they are playing a little bit better when he's on the floor versus when he's off. Over the last set of games, I guess since the start of January, which is 9-10 games. Since the start of January, the Raptors are 5.1 points per 100 possessions better with him on versus off, which is nice. It's very helpful. He's not hemorrhaging points when he's out there. There's still a negative team when he plays, but much less stark negative when he's on versus when he's off. That is great. He's not quite doing the thing he was doing with the Jazz where he was like single-handedly ruining their tanking because he just was so effective on the floor. It's still, they're losing those minutes. The defense has certainly lost a step, but the offense really came back around in that game against the Bucks. He played heavier minutes, I think, than maybe was expected against the Bucks because it's not a great matchup for him by any means. But with Pirtle having foul trouble, He got in there. He played 19 minutes, 15 points, 4 boards, 2 assists, a steal, 5 of 7, 2 of 4 from downtown. Great to see from Kelly Olynyk. And, what does this mean for trade value? Who knows? I still don't think he's necessarily a guy who's going to pull you a lot back at the deadline, but maybe some team sees that he's kind of rounding back into better physical shape and takes a chance on him. We'll see. But nice to see Kelly looking normal. And shout out to him for the kick-ass finish on the Grady Dick heave at the end of the half to close out that first half. Very heady YMCA-ass basketball play from Kelly Olynyk. The bad for me in this game, it's just the matchup against the Bucks, man. The Bucks own the Raptors, and it's a shame considering there was a time where it was very much flipped. The Raptors were very much the Bucks' daddy for a long stretch there back in the Kyle DeMar, Kawhi days. Not really the case these days, which is a shame, man, because beating the Bucks is usually very fun. They just don't have a hope against this Bucks team the way they're constructed right now. Defensively, they have no one outside Scottie Barnes to go and throw on Giannis, which puts so much onus on Scottie to kind of wear both hats, both as the best offensive player and the best defensive player. I think we saw the toll of that in this game where he went 4 of 10 or 4 of 16. And look, part of this is also the way the Bucks defend. They're really going to make life miserable for you in close. And that's where Scottie Barnes does his best work typically, is that sort of 15 feet and in range. And the Bucks are really damn good at making life hell for anyone who wants to operate inside 15 feet against their 2 gigantic guys in the middle in Brook Lopez and Giannis. And so just not a great matchup at all. It doesn't matter right now, obviously. This is not a playoff type matchup by any means, but certainly the Raptors are going to have some matchup stuff to sort out if they do want to go and get serious in the next couple of years here, because, this is the NBA. This is matchup life. And if you end up, kind of having these very clear glaring holes that not just the Bucks, but other teams can take advantage of and really exploit, you're going to be in some trouble. This happens with the Cavs too, right? Where the Cavs interior rim protection really works against what the Raptors want to do, which is move towards the rim with all they do and get a lot of shots up there as the number 1 rim frequency team in basketball. In this game against the Bucks, they shot just 29% of their shots at the rim, very low for their standards. And, they made a pretty good clip of them. They shot 81.5% actually at the rim in this game per clean the glass. That's great, but it's just not enough volume for a team that hit 8 threes and just doesn't have a lot of 3-point juice, especially when Immanuel Quickley's out and Grady Dick is going 0-5 from downtown. The lack of wing options is like, considering where we used to be in these parts, where OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Precious Achiuwa even for a couple of years there, and dating further back, Marcus Gasol, even Serge Ibaka had a lot of success building the wall against Giannis Antetokounmpo. It's just not really a thing they've got anymore. And this was a different type of game for the Raptors against the Bucks, where it was more single coverage for Scottie against Giannis, and Giannis just went nuts, 35 on 12 of 20, 11 of 18 at the line. And, this was very different from last Monday or 2 Mondays ago, where it was a situation where Giannis barely shot at all and just carved up the Raptors' poor help schemes and got his way to a triple-double with 11 points and 13 assists. It was a different type of recipe, but Giannis is the type of guy that you change the coverage on him, he's going to find a different way to exploit you. And the Raptors just don't have enough looks to throw at Giannis to really slow him down all that much. It was a lot for Scottie to handle in this one. He picked up 5 personal fouls as well. It's just it's a tough cover and for anybody. That's not against Scottie either, by the way. Scottie's a damn good defensive player. Not being able to stop literally Giannis Antetokounmpo does not change that, but it just added to the overall struggles of this game and adds to the problems the Raptors have in this Bucks matchup, where none of the games this year have felt remotely close, and it's just been a really, really tough slog for them. The in this game, I guess we'll go Bruce Brown, putting in another nice one. One of his better games of the season. What did he have? 17 points, 6 of 11, 2 of 5 from downtown, 6 boards. That's the type of stuff that some other team out there is going to say, hey, Bruce Brown can do that for us every night. That's a really nice bench piece to have who can maybe close some games for us. I still remain really interested and also quite skeptical as to what Bruce Brown is going to get on the market. Could they use him to get creative in some sort of situation where they grease the wheels of a bigger trade? I know Doug Smith kind of threw around the Raptors might be open to facilitating a Jimmy Butler trade. An expiring contract for Bruce Brown has got some value to it just because I think teams want expiring money. It's a tough cap climate right now, and there's not a lot of money to go around. And if you can get some expiring money on the books, that's helpful for lots of things, whether it's, going to sign free agents are more likely to then become a team that can use your cap space as a weapon to go and facilitate trades and accrue assets that way. And so, yeah, I do wonder if that's something the Raptors end up doing here. Maybe there's a contender that really talks themselves just into Bruce Brown as a nice player. I have no idea, but nice to see him have a game or a couple games over the last little bit here where he's looked a little bit more like himself. And hopefully he's able to, figure some things out here and continue the good play for the next couple weeks until the deadline. Still, again, pretty skeptical as to what he's going to get, but he's worthy of the in this one at least, because he's looked all right in a couple of these games recently. And that is a step up from what he once was. We will leave it there. Thank you so much for rocking with the show, as always. And we'll be back again tomorrow. I'm sure Vivek Jacob will be along, and we'll do some sort of big picture conversation, maybe check in a little bit on the status of where we're at rebuild wise and the progression of the guys within the season. Well, it's a chance to go big picture because they don't play a game tonight. And, big picture stuff is kind of the name of the game with this team right now. So we will do that coming tomorrow. We got the Raptors Magic game tomorrow night. We'll talk about that on Wednesday as well. And we will, again, take you through the rest of the week as we always do, both with the pod and the newsletter. And we appreciate you very much for being along for the ride. Please follow, subscribe, rate, review. Go to the newsletter by either going to the QR code on the screen or the link in the description of the podcast. And we will talk to you again tomorrow. Another episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Ooh, buckets.